Now in the final stages of planning, the Zoning and Planning Committee of the City Council continue to seek community input for the proposed Village Center Overlay District's zoning ordinance. The VCOD is a proposed set of zoning regulations for the commercial centers and the immediate surrounding residential areas for 12 of Newton's village centers. It includes 4 subdistricts with maximum heights between 2.5 and 4.5 stories applied to each village center uniquely and by right, which means a developer can build on a lot without special case-by-case permission. And it will allow by right new multifamily housing, which is a building that houses 3 or more separate households. It's currently not allowed anywhere in Newton. This will change the current zoning, which has the same set of requirements for all village centers.
We need to have a set of rules that allows for the right mix of uses at the right density so that we are enabling and will actually achieve the more diverse housing choices that we desperately need, more feet on the street so that our small shops can thrive. And we need to do it in a way that achieves a balance that is healthy for our community.
The balance is in the form of increasing housing options, including affordable and accessible, supporting local businesses, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and creating space to gather and socialize. There are 4 VCOD subdistricts. In the heart of the larger and especially close to public transit village centers is the proposed subdistrict Village Center 3, VC3 in other words. Maximum building height is 4.5 stories for mixed use or 75 feet tall, and 3.5 stories if close to a residential area with a maximum footprint of 15,000 square feet. Allowable uses are multifamily units, retail spaces, and office spaces. The Village Center 2 subdistrict VC2 is for mixed uses and residential buildings of moderate scale. The maximum height is 3.5 stories or 62 feet tall with a maximum footprint of 10,000 square feet. Allowable uses are multifamily units, retail spaces, and office spaces. The Village Center 1 subdistrict VC1 is for small to medium scale multifamily buildings. The maximum height is 2.5 stories or 45 feet tall with a maximum footprint of 4,000 square feet. Allowable uses are multifamily units and limited retail spaces. The Multi-Residence Transit Subdistrict, MRT, is for new, small-scale multifamily housing similar in size to the surrounding residential neighborhoods, and the converting of existing homes into multiple apartments or condos. The maximum height is 2.5 stories or 40 feet tall with a maximum footprint for new buildings at 1,500 square feet, or for converted buildings, the existing footprint plus a 50% addition. The VCOD affects 3.4% of the city's land area.
The Village Center Overlay District is an alternative to the underlying or existing zoning, but it does not replace the existing zoning. That's why it's called overlay. This new set of rules lays over the existing set of rules. What this does is it gives property owners more property rights. So really it increases the value of your property. Nothing's being taken away, more is being given.
Historically, Newton's development patterns have changed over the past 100 plus years. The maximum by right building heights that were allowed in 1922 was changed in 1953 and again in 1987.
So our current zoning proposal is right in line with what has been built and what has been allowed to be built for longer than our current rules are right now.
Zoning also changed for building by right new multifamily housing over the years. In 1921 and 1938, multifamily housing by right was allowed in 4 districts. In 1953, it dropped to 1 district. And from the 1970s on, multifamily housing by right is allowed nowhere in the city. Even in multi-residence districts, a special permit is required.
It takes a Herculean effort to build anything, particularly multifamily housing, whether it be parking requirements, height restrictions, setbacks, FAR, the fact that anything over 2 units requires a special permit. It basically is impossible to take a small piece of property and build housing. The rules instead are unpredictable. They lead to the aggregation of many, many pieces of property, and it leads to large development that's more expensive and takes more time.
Design is also a proposed factor, and it goes beyond the building footprint, height, and roof slope.
To make sure that when a new building was developed, they would have to do certain things. One, I'm not going to touch on all of them because there's a lot, but a couple really important ones. There's a minimum sidewalk width. The building needs to be set back to create a minimum sidewalk width. That creates an opportunity for things like street trees and seating. We want to make sure that the ground floor has transparency and active uses. We want to make sure that those spaces are going to be available for businesses that people want to frequent, because those are really what give these spaces a sense of vibrancy and vitality. We want to offer opportunities for architectural features to be added to buildings, so that it's not just a flat box, through bays, balconies, bay canopies. These are all things that can be added to a building beyond that maximum footprint. Again, so long as they're creating some texture to the streetscape. And then again, when we get to the rooftop, we get to that half-story requirement that either creates an opportunity for balconies or, again, tapers that upper floor so that it really isn't seen or visible from the ground below.
One major change being proposed is the amount of required parking for businesses and or residential units.
Requiring 2 spaces per residential unit and a space per every 250 square feet for commercial office space, or and there's other requirements for retail and residential, retail and restaurant. That adds up. It takes away a lot of the space that we want to be using for people. It costs a lot of money to build on-site parking versus shared parking. On-street parking, shared lots, that sort of thing. And it's sort of the antithesis of how a village center ought to work and has worked in New England for the better part of a century.
We are fully aware that people will and should provide parking. The market will decide. But we know right now that half of all parking provided in our multifamily housing sits empty. And that's really expensive. An underground parking spot requires about $100,000 to build. And anything that we can do to reduce the cost of construction is going to lead us to number 2, allowing for and creating more affordable housing. So we all know, I think in this room, but anyone listening online, we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance that requires 7 or more unit projects to have a certain percentage of affordable housing, 17.5%.
While the city has been working on the general zoning changes for years, and specifically the VCODs for the past 2, as of August 2022, the state is now requiring MBTA communities, which are communities that are along the commuter rail, subway stations, ferry terminals, or bus stations, to allow by right and not a special permit a certain amount of multifamily housing to be built. Newton is one of 177 communities affected by the MBTA communities law and is required to allow by right 8,330 housing units to be built near the local transit stations. The city must be in compliance by December 31st, 2023.
There's no requirement to build the units. This is purely what the zoning would allow for. So the good news here is that we were already working on this. We were already working on making it easier to build housing near transit when these requirements came down. So we're a step ahead of many other communities in meeting this tight deadline.
We're doing this not only to develop housing, we're doing this to support our local economies and a quality of community life that people say they want, and that we know means a healthy community.
You can still contribute to the public hearing by emailing your comments to citycouncil@newtonma.gov and ZAP Committee Clerk Jacqueline Norton at jnorton@newtonma.gov now through September. And you can find out more information about Newton's VCOD online at newtonma.gov/government/planning/village-centers. Jen Adams, Newton News, Newton Center.